Here is the Dinoplex ignition box. This is, as far as I understand, the very first capacitive ignition, CDI ignition, for a production car. This box is from 1968. I have it apart here. So, the inside. I suspect it wasn't, this is one of the failures I was having. So I would drive the car. If it idled too long, if I revved it way up, all of a sudden the spark would just shut off. At least I think it's the spark. But the engine would just die while right in running mid motion, and then let it sit for a little while and it would come back to life. So I think my suspicion was that the transistors maybe were overheating or not working. So I thought I'd check that out. This is a wiring schematic of that guy. This is the Dinoplex.org. Shout out to those guys that put this together. This has everything in here. These two transistors here form an oscillator. They call it an inverter, but it's actually same thing. It oscillates through this coil. It's sort of hard to explain, but you energize the base of one and it grounds, and then it energizes. It causes a shift in the voltage in the coil, and then it enters the other. And it loops back and forth, and that oscillation creates high voltage over on this side, which is this orange and the high voltage supply. But these transistors are notorious for going out. There's also a capacitor that's notorious for going out, and that's what I was checking out. So here originally, when I first got it, I had to replace these capacitors under here. Actually, it was one big capacitor, but I was only able to find two at Fry's. So these two together make the capacitor that was missing. I glued that in. That's been working ever since. And this box did work. It just, like I said, seems to be intermittent. So underneath, you can see these places where these transistors were, and those are these. Leave it to Ferrari to use these really nice ceramic heat transfer plates to isolate them from the case. Unfortunately, I didn't find any heatsink grease or anything on these, so maybe somebody took these out before, changed them, didn't grease them, or maybe they didn't come greased. Anyway, I'm going to put some new grease on here. This was the carrier that was underneath in here. And then if we want to look at some of the other components in here, I guess we could do that. This is a bridge rectifier that turns the AC high voltage into DC. You can look up that on the web. Those are the rectifiers there. Let's see. That there is a thyristor, and that triggers the whole thing. So in the other video, I had this distributor, which was the points, which I adjusted, and that triggers this circuit here, which causes a pulse of current to come down this line and open this SCR or thyristor or gate, as it were. So you can see that the high voltage comes up here and down here through this capacitor, so it is on the primary side of the ignition coil. And this capacitor here is the one that charges up and waits for this thyristor to fire. Once it fires, it shorts out this capacitor to basically the other side of the primary ignition coil, sending a big pulse through it, and then sending the spark out to the spark plugs. So, and then once that drain happens, that instantaneous drop in voltage down to below 0 or too close to 0, then that thing will reset, and then I'll wait for another pulse to come through here. Anyway, you can read all about those or find other videos on how this kind of system works, but that is the basics. I think once I'm done with this whole thing, I'll put it all on a bench and rotate it and see what's going on. The next part of this was figuring out if these transistors were really bad or something, and I did find that